Vicky, thanks so much for your time. Great to see you. You've just come from Government House where you signed a condolence book.
Yes, I've just come from Government House where I signed the condolence book on behalf of Britain, sharing the grief and the mourning with Australia.
Yeah, we saw some of that great affection that Prince Philip did have for Australia. He was often funny in some of the public speeches that he gave. We saw some glimpse of him having these jokes with the Queen as well. Do you think he had great affection for Australia, and was that reciprocated?
Certainly he had great affection for this country. He visited it over 20 times in his role as consort, and I think he'd been here at least 2 times before during the course of the Second World War, one of which was a very moving experience for him when he commanded one of our Royal Naval vessels, bringing prisoners of war back to Australia, Australian men who had fought in the Second World War and suffered greatly. And I know that that experience deeply affected him. So he was a regular visitor here and I think understood this country very well.
Yeah, I think so
and
too.
When you look at the early...
Sorry, Vicky, to interrupt. Please continue.
No, that's all right. When you look at those early newsreels of those visits that he made here, certainly the ones on his own, as well as those with Her Majesty, you can see the sort of smiling faces, the banter that he was having with the crowds. He seemed at ease and relaxed with the people that he met here, and indeed them with him.
Indeed, and he did bring that that poignance as well and sense of occasion, but many times we saw this sense of larrikin in him as well. And I think Australians, perhaps more than any of the other Commonwealth nations, really appreciated that that sense of larrikin in him, his sense of humour. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and certainly I personally saw his very good humour on the few tiny handful of occasions that I personally met him. I remember the first time I met him in Penang in Malaysia in February 1989. I was a very junior diplomat at the time. I'd gone to support a transit that he was making, on his way back from Japan following the funeral of Emperor Hirohito. And he came over, he spoke to me, he cracked a couple of jokes, he put me at ease. And watching him with the flight crew who were having a rest overnight in Penang, enjoying their company and deciding that as they'd arrived late into Penang, they only had one night in Malaysia. He treated the entire crew to a great local delicacy, satay. So there was a satay party for everyone to enjoy, a little taste of Malaysia that he hosted.
That's great. And we've seen so many anecdotes as well that people have shared on social media and right around the world. Did he at all resent his role? Did he resent the constraints of the royal family? Or did he just come to accept that he was not only a great partner for the Queen, but an important part of her architecture, if you like?
Look, he entered into the role that he gained when the Queen ascended the throne wholeheartedly, and he dedicated himself to a life of service to the country. And that meant public service alongside her as her consort. He embraced that role, he made it his own. He had to be the architect of his own destiny in support of her. And you look at this enduring partnership of almost 70 years by her side, looking after her, looking out for her, being there at times of great joy and great sadness for our nation, for your nation, for the Commonwealth as a whole. He played a vital and important role in her life and in the life of all the Commonwealth countries around the world.
He certainly was my favourite royal, Vicky, High Commissioner. I guess as a diplomat and very professional as you are, you probably couldn't say who your favourite royal was.
No, I don't think that would be appropriate. They each play an important role, beginning, of course, with Her Majesty as our Queen, and all the other members of the royal family support her, not least him. And that does leave a vacuum, which I'm sure that Prince Charles will step into. And we saw that yesterday when he came out and made a very moving personal statement about his father. And he, in turn, will be there for Her Majesty, carrying the role now as the patriarch of the family to take it on into the future. So when we think about the senior royals and the roles that they play, you know, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, he supported almost 1,000 charities. He came up with the idea of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards to give young people experiences that would be character forming and shaping, to give them the confidence for the adult lives that they were about to walk into. And his passion on environmental issues, biodiversity, I'm sure was an inspiration for his son, Prince Charles, as well. You know, amongst the many titles beyond the royal ones that the Duke of Edinburgh had, he was president of the World Wildlife Fund. Yeah. And in his travels around the world, he saw the effects of climate, environmental damage, and he was deeply passionate on that front. And at this sad time, as we remember and indeed celebrate his life, a whole new generation who have never seen those images from the past are beginning to understand the man that he was over the many decades, almost a century of his life, of the dedication and the hard work in support of those charities, but most of all, in support of Her Majesty.
High Commissioner, we thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed.